Recording. Hey everybody, Dave Whitmarsh here, Whitmarsh Consulting Group. I'm joined with a panel of Anisa Aven, Robert Brown. Anisa Aven's the CEO, founder of Turnkey Coaching Solutions. Robert Brown, CEO of Illumo. And I'll let me tell you a bit about myself, and then we'll go through the chain here. So I have a network of HR reference sites, best practice in HR, talent acquisition, benefits, and training, leadership, and coaching. And collectively, there's about 200,000 folks that are part of the network. And I've committed to doing 12 of these virtual events throughout the year. I announced that I'm going to be having PHR, SPHR, and HRCI credits. Hopefully that'll all be in order for my next event. So definitely, if you're looking for your recertification, because of travel restrictions, hopefully we'll be able to assist you. And I am going to turn it over to Anisa for a little introduction of her and her organization.
Well, thank you, David. Anisa Aven. I am the CEO of Turnkey Coaching and Development Solutions. We are a learning service outsourcing provider, providing training, coaching, enterprise solutions. We have coaches, trainers, and OD consultants in every major metropolitan area in the US and in key hubs globally. And just recently, this last year, we've launched a next gen AI driven engagement and coaching platform, specifically targeting diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. So I'm super excited to be here. I love Robert is Illumo and the work that you're doing over there. So, and this topic is, I think, critically important right now, being able to make decisions and find your fires with data. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Robert.
Well, hey, thank you. Yeah, I'm thrilled and appreciate you guys letting me come on and having this conversation today, because one of the things I love is being able to make really good choices and decisions, but being able to make those based on data. And it's interesting because, in most of my roles, I've been in leadership roles with organizations as the CEO or some type of executive leadership. And one of the things that I've always had throughout my entire career was great financial metrics, right? So to lead and guide every single day, I could get data surrounding every aspect of the organization except one. And that was our most important aspect, which was, of course, our people. And so when we set out at Illumo to really solve that problem, because making good decisions is easy when you have good insight, good data, a good level of understanding. I love to say that you can't fix what you don't understand. And once you do have a good level of understanding, then of course the solutions to that become easy. And so our jobs become easy. And when we look at it, organizations today are struggling with, like you mentioned, right, DE&I, huge issues and struggles with organizations trying to transform their organizations forward. But the first question, of course, is, well, okay, what do we need to do? What does that look like? And what we believe is that in every organization, of course, is different. And the challenges that your organization has are different. So it's pretty difficult to just take some cookie cutter off the shelf solution to try to solve that. What we recommend is, of course, just gathering the data and the insight, because then once you get that really good level of understanding, the solutions become very clear. So that's what we really focus on is we're the first real-time human analytics platform that takes and translates human sentiment into live visual data and metrics. So let me show you what we do.
Beautiful. What you're really talking about here is helping those who are responsible for the development of their employees and making the business case to continue developing their employees. And it's something that's sorely missing from most learning and development programs. Even those who say we've got metrics have a hard time quantifying those.
That's exactly right. Another topic that I love to talk about is just the ability to, we translate again human sentiment into numbers, and the language of business is numbers. Mm-hmm. And we really help HR and people leaders and organizational development strategists to really be able to do that. How do we take and create the numbers and metrics? Because that's exactly right. As you look at organizations, in fact, I had a CHRO a couple months ago now, almost in tears with me as she said, look, you've done what I could never do in my organization. Mm-hmm. And I said, look, well, that sounds awesome. What was that?
What was it? I want to know more of
that. And she said, you've been able to help me to raise the level of the importance of people and culture. I've tried for years. Frankly, personally, she says, I feel like it's fallen on deaf ears for years as I've tried to communicate we need to do some of these things within the organization. But what became very, very clear to her was that when she was able to show this dashboard that I'll show you here in a second, and they could automatically see in quantifiable numbers exactly what was going on within the organization, well, then that changed their whole perspective. In fact, she says, I've almost over the last few meetings, it's been difficult for me to, all they want to talk about is this, because now for the first time, they have live visible metrics that help them easily assess, hey, we're doing great here. We're struggling in these areas. Boom. What do we do about those? Right. And now they want to focus on it because, of course, they're fixers. That's what they do. They fix problems, but they fix problems that they can see. And if they can't see it and quantify it as an actual issue, then no offense, but it just doesn't carry as much weight saying, hey, I think we have this problem versus data and metrics over here showing we definitely have this problem. So that's one of the biggest things that I think I see.
What do you see people use other than the fact that it's great to have, Robert, but what are some of the auxiliary things that you're saying? Like, are people using it to secure budget, to find out what's working?
Absolutely. Once you start tracking and have the ability to measure those things, then it's all of those things. It's, raising the visibility is one of the biggest ones up front, right? Okay, look, where do we need to spend time? And it's equally as helpful for the people leaders in that position, because you're thinking, hey, well, based on my anecdotal insights and based on who I talk to in my circles, here's what I think we need to do. And then you deploy that. But oftentimes we end up with initiatives not hitting the mark because that little circle or bubble that we live in isn't necessarily representative of the entire organization that we're trying to have an impact on. So sometimes we end up fixing the wrong things or taking the wrong approach just because, again, we didn't have the insight or the knowledge or the information. So that's one of the things I see is that organizations are able to then identify in hard verifiable numbers exactly what matters most and where they should be focusing those efforts. And then to your point, David, is, once you see that, well, it's 1,000 times easier to walk into the boss or whoever we have to go talk to get approval for that, is to be able to show it in two ways. And we help organizations show it in two ways. One is the physical verifiable number, right? Let me give you a couple of examples. So I'm going to hop into some of the different things that we track and measure. So for example, diversity, equity, inclusion, right? So, and this is a live company that I'm showing you. So here's how they're trending over the last few months, over the last year. Here are some of the metrics that we're measuring. We're measuring, for example, well, what level of priority do you feel like the organization is putting on diversity, equity, inclusion? And I can see that they have a score of an 82, which is actually really good. It's 3 above because we benchmark them against other organizations. It's 3 above and across other organizations in their same industry and size. So it starts to help me to identify, oh, well, look, my opinion, I feel like matters here. Well, wow, that's 10 above. right? So what we're doing is we're taking these key metrics here within the platform. Let me hop into one and show you, and I'll pop into the actually in here to the questions. So we're measuring, do I feel comfortable being myself at Big Leap? And Big Leap is this client that we're showing you. Do I feel like it has an inclusive work environment? How satisfied am I with the importance given to inclusion here? That type of thing. What these do is these are questions, and some of our questions are scale-based, and they create numbers and the metrics that you're seeing. And that helps us to identify, based on asking these questions, really where we are. But what we do is we ask these questions every single week. Not that same question, but randomized across all of these different possible experience campaigns. So we have over 70 unique metrics that you can activate and turn on to measure. And then the platform will randomize and say, hey, we're going to ask Anisa a question this week about alignment. And next week, we're going to ask her a question about our customers. And the next week, a question about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so it randomizes and keeps the experience really fresh. But not only do we deliver these powerful numbers, which this is one of my favorites. This is the one I was mentioning that she showed her executives. And in here, being able to see by team, by location, by department, however you want to sort this data and look at it. I can sort it by people with brown hair or green hair or whatever I want, right? And look at the data based on that. But what it does is immediately tells me, hey, look, the sales department is doing really good in these areas, but look, our creative services team, they're the ones that are struggling the most. And look at our team scores and look at our leadership scores and look at the systems that they're using. They're not really happy with those. Well, again, that tells me exactly where to look.
Yeah, let me ask you a question about this. So,
please.
So often our HR budgets are, well, we're told we need some leadership development, right? And we want to be fair, right? So we might roll out a leadership that will address management in all units, right? But what you are sharing here allows us to then, even if we want a foundational training and development program for all leaders, we know that we've got some issues here in creative services. And otherwise, how do people know? I mean, right, we have subjective or we have hunches.
That's right.
Right, but that's it. You don't have objective data, and that's what you're bringing.
That's right. And that allows you, like you just mentioned, Anisa, to now take a surgical and strategic approach to your organization. Because if the sales team has a leadership score of a 93 and a team score of a 94, well, we probably don't need to spend a lot of time and effort there.
That's right.
Right. And so now we can take a surgical approach to knowing where and how to apply that. Most importantly, though, is what I love about it is then once you do, now let's say that you do introduce Anisa and you bring in a leadership and a coaching for this leader, right, to help them grow and improve. Well, now we can actually see the benefit of those results because we're going to continue to get consistent data. Mm-hmm. What we really like to think about is that, we're the anti-survey platform because organizations have used and tried to use surveys to gather insight, but they're so ineffective at gathering real-time feedback. Of course, it's only ever one point whenever you do the survey, but then you get high-level insights that don't really help you know and understand and take tactical. So then you have to go do focus groups to try to create that, right?
Yes.
So you go through this whole big process, and 6 or 8 months later, we're trying to solve a problem from 6 or 12 months ago. We just can't operate in that. We need real-time data, and that's what this delivers.
What I like about that, just showing that there is, in the HR world, well, I guess, reality is in pretty much every department in any organization, you never get all the budget you want to do everything. So if they were to give you, $10,000, for a program that is leadership development, or 100,000 or, $1 million, depending on the size of your company, it's still never going to be what you ideally want. So you could, and traditionally they make those decisions based off of title. So if you have a certain amount of budget that would go towards leadership development or coaching, and you get a smaller budget, really what happens, the line in the organization just goes higher as far as who actually gets that, right? And in this, having that data, you could shuffle that around and put it way through or deeper into the organization where that organization is glaring, or let's say the word fires, because that's what we use to get people into the session. You identify those fires, you can throw that budget towards those hot spots, and maybe even leave the top guys right out of it, right?
Yeah, it's all about taking and applying your limited resources and the resources you have available to you and applying them surgically in a way that's going to make the most impact. But without this type of data, how and it's not possible, frankly. You just can't. And so that's why having this type of live real-time insight matters so much to an organization. And again, this is where for HR and for, people leaders, having this type of data and being able to bring that, another thing I hear all the time is, hey, well, trying to raise up and essentially get a seat at the table, right? I want to be a more strategic people leader. I want to help try to get there. Well, in order to do that, you've got to bring something to the table. Yep. And what you need to bring to the table is data and insight that they can know and understand. And when you can walk in the door with this helps solve that problem and elevates you within that strategic position. Now, strategically, you have the data and insight you need to strategically approach the organization and help it to tactically start knocking off these different edges. But without it, you're shooting in the dark and throwing darts.
Well, what else is really nice too, Robert, that I think you identify is I think without good data, you're reactionary, right? So you think, this initiative's got big focus, and I'm not saying it doesn't, right? But so you might have to adjust your budget or your efforts depending on your resources, and you might do something focused on DEI. And you might only be able to move the bar a little bit because perhaps your company's doing amazing things when it comes to D&I, but you might have a sinking ship on something else. So you can identify those throughout the course of the year and pivot and move towards the items that are really problematic, right?
100%. One of my favorite things, to now take this. So this is kind of the first amazingness is just the ability to literally, based on all these different experiences, and I can go back, sorry, we're jumping all over it a little bit today, but based on these experiences, now we're able to clearly and quickly identify where our gaps are. Now, what's the most important thing? The most important thing to know now is, well, why is creative services struggling? And that's the real, if you, the whole numbers are important because numbers point us in the right direction. But the most important thing is the insight that you need to understand the why behind those numbers. That's the critical component, because that's where you get actionable insight in real time so that you can do something about it. And that's what really happens here within the platform is when I go in here, this is what we call engage. And a variety of, so some of our questions were scale-based, those create the numbers. And then our other questions are conversation starters. And it's surrounding that same topic, but now I'm going to ask a question to try to engage you in a conversation so that I can learn why you're sharing what you are, why you scored us the way that you are. For example, here's some conversations. And this is a great example about, hey, what's the one thing you'd suggest to improve our policies and procedures? And the person comes back right up your alley, Anisa, with training on diversity and inclusion and sexism in the workplace. Okay, hey, thank you, we respond. That's a serious subject matter. Can you help me understand? Bottom line, we're asking clarifying questions, additional. Let's have a conversation and let's talk about this. And we start having this ongoing conversation with this individual to truly learn and understand exactly what's going on within the organization. That's the power of the platform. That's what we're really doing here, is delivering powerful, powerful insights surrounding the exact experience that your people are having, not 6 months ago, not 12 months ago on a one-time survey, but this is what's happening today. Feedback coming in today, listening that we're doing today, helping us know and understand how to guide and make small adjustments. It's not always about these massive changes that we have to make. But if we can make the small, little, easy things, then we don't have to get to those big, huge, oh my gosh, we got this amazing fire now within the organization because we just didn't know. I have another story of of an organization that ended up exactly in that same exact situation, where with everything going on with racial inequality this year and over the last year, well, within their organization, executives in the organization felt like, well, we're not personally going to play a role in that. We're not really going to say anything. Well, that was exactly the opposite of what their people felt like they should do. But they didn't find that out until there was almost a boycott of the organization based on them not doing something about it.
Wow.
And then the executives are like, and now they've destroyed all of this. Well, bottom line, middle management wasn't passing up to executive management about what was happening. And bottom line, they ended up in this huge fire, where if they had simply had a tool like this in place, which they do now, but had they had it in place, they wouldn't be in the fire and fighting fires. They're able to just immediately identify it. So anyways, that's the power of these conversational approach that we take, is to really give you the tactical insights that you need.
And when you talk about these approaches, I think it's important to know, Robert, what built in, like, how do we get this data? What are the questions? What do they look like?
I have a question about that screen. So when we come back to that screen again, I want you to talk to us about the confidentiality piece.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, let's, while we're here.
That.
Yeah, while we're here, let's do it. So ask your question.
Well, what I'm reading on the screen as an example, some of that is quite personal. And I'm looking at the employee information at the top.
Yes.
Explain how you keep that input confidential while a real person is able to respond. How does that work?
Yeah, so you'll notice here that I can't see who this person is. It's programmatically, like there's no way to dive in and try to figure this out. What I do know is that this is a person in this office location. They're on this team, they're a Gen Z, and they're a female. The reason I know that is because there's at least 5 females that are also Gen Z that are also on this client service team. So what happens is that these tags only show up if there's enough people to protect the anonymity. Mm-hmm. Because to the organization, you do need to know where these comments are coming from, so you know how and which teams to address which issues. So that's key and that's critical. But protecting anonymity, if you click on this little option up here, it explains how we make sure that we do that. So there's no way in the platform for me to know who that is, nor for them to know who's responding to them. So it's anonymous on both sides for us to have that conversation.
And are you finding that a lot of the organizations are responding to these questions? Well, is it a leadership teams? Is it your HR team? And a follow-up question to that is, not everyone knows how to respond to feedback effectively. How are you, do you help them? Do they have some coach support? Because I can see some folks being like, thanks, but we solved that last year, just kind of flippant and not really going to deal with that. That's kind of the extreme, but that's the risk you take when just anyone untrained can respond to feedback.
You're correct. And in fact, yeah, we've seen that, and we've had to coach surrounding that. So when it comes to the responses, there's two approaches that you can take. Some organizations love to do their own responses with their own people and their own teams engaging with that. And so we do have a course actually that we provide to them, and some training and education on how to properly do that. In that course, one of the favorite stories I love to tell about it is that I use myself as a great example, as a terrible example, actually. Meaning that, so, I give the example of, I'm having a conversation with my wife. She's telling me about something, and I'm sitting there thinking, oh, I can fix that. I can solve that. That's really easy. And so then I start trying to help her solve it and fix it. And what does she turn around and say to me? Of course, she says,
I ask you to solve?
That's right. I don't need you to fix my problems. I just want you to listen to me. And that's part of what we describe in this, because in the engaged conversations, that is the mistake that sometimes people make in there, is that they try to fix or solve things, or that they, don't really listen. And there is a skill set. You're exactly right. That's why the majority of our clients actually have a Lumo, and our trained staff and teams provide that service to them. One, because a lot of them don't have the time to do it. And you do have to be, these are interactions and interactive, and you need to be right on it. And so one is time. And the other is just because, we have a trained team that knows how to facilitate those conversations, listen very intently, and be able to ask the additional questions that, bottom line, just help us to understand. We're not trying to say whether they're right or wrong. We're just trying to understand the experience they're having and the why exactly.
Very good.
So does that answer that question, Anisa?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah,
Alleviated some concern.
Yeah, let me hop over here then and show you. So we worked with organizational psychologists to help us understand what we term the human experience at work. What we mean by that is that I believe that we've kind of come from, employee satisfaction was kind of the first thing that we worked on and tried to track for a little while. Then it was employee, experience and employee engagement. And now we're focusing on employee experience because we're recognizing it's the experiences that people are having. Well, we like to call it the human experience, because if there's anything great that's come out of the pandemic, and this is probably the only thing, but is that organizations have started to recognize the value of their people and focus on their people from a people and culture perspective even more. They're looking to help try to support their mental health, their physical and mental well-being, all of these different things. Organizations had not paid that much attention to that in the past, where there is a hyper focus on that now. Well, that's fantastic. And that's what we're talking about, is that human experience at work. So when we look in here, that's what all these different campaigns are built to try to do, is to help understand the total and complete experience of an individual that's working within your organization. Everything from DE&I to engagement, to your customer interactions, to how leadership, how my team works, how everything in the platform is designed to help that mental health. And then you can see, you just turn on and off which of these campaigns that you want. And based on that, like here's our new hire. I love our new hire. That really helps people as they go through that whole new hire cycle and everything. But then you can see in here which campaigns you want to turn on, activate, and what you're looking for most within your organization. When you activate one of these, then I'll hop into our well-being campaign. Underneath this campaign, then, we're seeing over the last 30 days, over the last, year, 2 years, however long you've been on the platform. And then down here, we're seeing the actual metrics. So we're measuring personal growth and rewards and psychological safety and their work-life balance. We just got asked to build a new resilience. Resilience is a huge issue right now, right? And burnout. And so we got asked to build that campaign. We just barely put it in the platform this last week. And so this organization has launched it, but I have a score of a 0 just because they're getting data and new insight that's coming in. So that's what happens here within each of these campaigns. And so you just literally turn on the campaign and then go into each campaign and turn on the sub-metrics that you want, and it's whatever is most important to you and your organization. It also depends a little bit on size, because if you're a smaller company, you frankly don't have the number of people to be able to turn on like all of our campaigns, where some of the larger organizations, of course, they can turn on every campaign that we have and gather data surrounding everything. So that's what happens here in these experiences campaigns. But one of the next best things is that we can put a needle on anything. So you'll notice, for example, I don't have a campaign that's pre-built for organizational values, but yet those are a huge driver within an organization, and something that, have you ever seen an organization that can actually track those? I haven't.
No.
Like, how do you track trust? Well, we can build based on your definition of trust. And that's the reason why we haven't built them just across the board, is because everybody's definition of trust on an organization is slightly different. And so what we do is work with you, figure out exactly what that is. Then we build a metric. And now guess what? I can measure it across every team, every department, every location throughout your entire organization. I can now measure and help you to understand your mission, your vision, your values, all of those things, and how they're being upheld throughout the organization. It's phenomenal. So we can build custom metrics and custom campaigns according to whatever it is that you're trying to understand.
Well, I feel myself fidgeting, because I'm like, okay, that's a lot of campaigns. I want all this data. Well, from the employee experience, okay, I'm literally responding to questions every day. I'm sure that's not the way it is. Explain it to me so that I can say, okay, this is how much time this is going to take my employees. This is how often they're experiencing a question, that kind of thing.
Oh, great question. Yeah, so that experience was paramount to us. In order to create that experience to be so simple, I call it frictionless. We wanted a frictionless experience. So one of the things that we found is that methodology was really important. While we can engage with people across all kinds of different ways, like, of course we could do email. That's frankly our worst, because, who responds to email nowadays? Well, we all should, right? But so email, but what we try to do is just find where your people are. So for example, if you're a company that uses Slack, well, then let's just ask the questions and engage with them in Slack.
Okay.
But one of my favorites is literally just the cell phone. And that's because we didn't even design an app. We just send a text, a simple text. And this is the important part, Anisa, is you have settings in the platform. And our most recommended is our once a week setting. So once a week, the system goes into the platform, looks at what questions you've been asked, which ones you haven't, based on what categories, and randomizes on a different topic every single week. You get a new kind of question. So like I said, you don't get a question, about the customer, and then another one about the customer next week, and another one you're getting something about every one of these randomized open campaigns and individual metrics. So it stays fresh, and you're not getting something and hit with the same thing all of the time. But that by asking, maybe you get a question about the customer this week, maybe David gets a question about DE&I this week. Well, by doing that across our teams, that gathers all the data and the insights we need consistently surrounding all of these different metrics. So that's how we keep it fresh, keep it simple, and it's very easy. And, if it's one of those questions about just give me a rating, it takes me like 3 seconds to respond to that. So we actually have not heard, and knock on wood, but we literally have not heard any feedback from employees saying, oh, it's just too much.
Right, but you still have the flexibility to adapt, right, and change and adjust that. So, like,
you can adjust.
Who knew what was going to happen, this time last year, right? And so, if you wanted to throw a survey out on work from home, and or I guess I even have to create one, whatever the next big pandemic or issue would be, you can launch that out, increase the frequency, and get data in like a week or
Absolutely. Yeah. So you can kick off, we can kick off things. We can also prioritize. And if there was something, hey, we want to push this out and get a lot of insight on it right now, we can also change priorities. So there's a lot of different settings technically that you can adjust. But the big, I think, question is, hey, do people get tired of this? And
Right.
am I going to get tired of it by engaging this often? And I get that question a lot. And so the first thing is that, of course, it's simple and easy. And so we made it very quick and easy for people. But the real key, I will say, the ultimate goal of that, I always say, well, that's going to depend on you, because people don't get tired of engaging in questions or providing feedback. What they get tired of is if they don't feel like that feedback is being acted upon or makes a difference. And so if you show them, like this organization, so let me show you back here on the homepage. So they currently have, show me another company on the planet, frankly, that has 95% of their people engaging with them. So, if you want me to prove it, let me prove it to you. This organization's been on the platform for a little over a year. And in fact, they just won one of our Human Experience Awards. But they have 95% of their people engaging with the platform on a monthly basis. Like, that's phenomenal. Like, that's off the chart. When I hear people talk about surveys, I had a company just the other day. Oh yeah, we have 2,500 employees. I got a 7% return on my engagement survey. Well, two things. One, and they're like, well, so of course, how are we going to go make choices and decisions based on that, right? But on the flip side, and what I didn't share is, well, that's because in the past that you probably haven't made choices and decisions on that. So people look at it as like, well, yeah, it's just one more thing I have to do versus it's not going to benefit me. I don't see the company taking action. And that's what we're trying to change, is from this, once a year we take a survey, and then once a year we try to do something and attach it, 6 or 8 months later. That does not work. That does not create engagement. That's the opposite. That creates disengagement within a company. That's what we're trying to change here.
So out of curiosity, Robert, and you never know the exact numbers because you just don't do that, but what percent of companies actually like to share that information back in these metrics back? Because we talk about how people like to know there's results and like to be and don't like to be surveyed and don't like to be asked questions and when they don't think there's anything done on those actions. But could this be used, or of course it can be used, but have you seen it being used as a communication tool that sort of people push out and say, listen, clearly we have an issue around here. Our numbers were, below where we wanted to be. It doesn't represent our company values. And because of that, we've launched this, and this. Stay tuned for, your updated data in 6 months.
Yeah. I love the question, because what we teach is this process, and we call it our LEAP process. Listen, engage, take action, and measure your progress. I believe that engagement comes through actually engaging your people. And you have to have a systematic process in place in order for that to remain consistent. If you don't have a way to consistently engage, take action, go through that process and that cycle, if it's not systematically deployed in your organization, then that's why we have these huge gaps where, oh, it's that flavor of the month. Well, let's go try this. It doesn't stick. And so that's where within organizations, that's why we help them to just take and systematize this whole thing. We're systematizing feedback. We're gathering it consistently. We're taking action on it consistently. Because one of the biggest gaps that organizations actually have, David, is what you just said. They gather some feedback in a survey. They think that then they understand it. They go take actions, and they end up taking the wrong actions because they didn't involve their people in actually fixing the problem with them. Yeah. That's why
we just compounds everything, and everybody gets even more frustrated. And
that's right.
Yeah.
That's why we created this whole initiatives process in the platform, is to help solve that problem. Let us then take what we're learning, let us share it with you, say, okay, here's what we heard out of the feedback. Now let me tell you, here's what we're hearing, here's what we're thinking. Based on that, we're thinking we probably need to take some action on this. And then there's a variety of ways, but bottom line, this is designed in here under initiatives to take that first collaborative step to work with your people to co-create solutions, gathering feedback. Because even if you pull in the team, let's say you've got your team and, the 50 people on your team are all sitting in the conference room talking together about how to solve this problem. What you're going to end up with is 4 or 5 people in there that talk a lot and share a lot and are open and feel comfortable. And then you're going to have other people that sit in the back and never say anything because they don't feel comfortable sharing. So how do you gather feedback effectively? Well, that's why we do it this way, is because, yes, that's a great way. And pulling people together is, I'm not saying not to do that. But in addition to that, then as those ideas come up and now you say, okay, here's what the team came up with, here's what we think, here's who's going to do what and when and how and what we're thinking about taking action on. And then you kick it off to this individual team and say, okay, I want to get feedback from the client service team surrounding if this is a good idea or not. Then you kick this off and now everybody can provide anonymous feedback again surrounding, hey, yeah, I didn't want to say anything in that meeting, but here's what I was thinking, and here's some of the gaps, and here's the things that I think we may want to consider because that may have these negative effects if we do it this way, and here's some other ideas or suggestions. That's the key. And that's what, again, that we do. So communication in both the initiatives, plus you have polls. Like, this is one of the questions. I love seeing this question in this company about, hey, look, we're thinking about having an in-person event. If we did, and we took the right precautions, would you want to come? And here's the results. So I share with organizations all the time, don't guess, just ask.
Right.
That's right. Yeah, just ask. And that's the whole power of this tool, is the active, open communication. One of the biggest frustrations in metrics, you'll see it in the metrics all the time, is corporate communications. We don't feel like we get communicated. And then you talk to the corporate communications director and they're like, are you kidding me? We send like 3 emails a week. And it's like, well, yeah, but did you just hear what you said?
Yeah.
You send 3 emails a week. How are they going to keep up with all of that? What about some little short snippets? Why don't you pop in here and click on an announcement and kick out an announcement really fast just to share? Let's share an announcement and let's say, hey, don't forget this, or hey, just a reminder of this, or maybe you're in leadership training and development and you're trying to train and raise the level of some specific skill set. Well, create a little video and send it out via text. Hey, here's the training for the week, right? So many different ways you can use this to communicate.
Right. And have you ever stumbled across anything, Robert? And I know that surveys generally are, the participation rates are fairly low. Have you ever stumbled across a CEO that has everybody has to do it?
Oh yeah, of course.
I guess I have a dumb question, but
yeah, no, my brother-in-law, he was over during the holidays, so this is a few months ago now.
Mm-hmm.
But he's like, oh yeah, at the end of the year, here comes the dreaded annual survey, and he's like, I have literally like begged, bribed, because of course it comes back on him if people don't fill it out. So he's trying to do everything he possibly can. And I said, well, why do your people not want to fill it out? And he says, because they keep saying the same things and nothing ever happens. Everybody says, well, why would I spend my time filling it out and taking all of this when it doesn't really matter? And that's the problem with that traditional approach. And that's exactly what we're trying to solve, because organizations, in order to survive as the economy now is roaring back, like I'm in Salt Lake City is where I'm located. We're already we're less than 3% unemployment. We're at like back to 2.7 or 8% or something right now. It's crazy. And it's just going and going. So it's, the next big epidemic is going to be whether you can attract and retain people to work at your company or not.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be the biggest struggle. And that's where people aren't, you're not just competing with your competitors to sell your products. You're competing with your competitors and every business around you to try to attract and retain the top talent that you need to grow and build your business. That's the whole purpose for this. That's why you need to create that amazing human experience, is because if you don't, man, that's organizations that don't do that are going to really, really struggle. And that's what we see.
Robert, you're on that note, and keeping in the theme of our conversation around fires, we work with a lot of organizations that are doing a lot to cultivate the culture and engage employees. And yet they still get the terrible reviews on Glassdoor. And one of the things they're beginning to realize it is about the amount of time from which we get the feedback to where we take action. If the longer that period is, the more likely this individual has already given up on it. So even if you take action, it's too little too late, and they don't even necessarily connect the action to the original feedback.
That's right. Yeah, when it's 6-8 months later, how do you connect it? Oh yeah, that was off that survey that we said 6 months ago. Even if you are amazing at taking surveys, if you're one of the few companies that takes a survey, takes it all the way through, takes action, and finally does something, by the time that happens, you're exactly right. You don't even get credit for it.
and it ends up falling on HR's responsibility. We've spent all this money on retention and training and picnics, and what the heck? Why are we still, why is our culture still so unhappy? I have a question for you related to the logistics for non-knowledge workers, warehouse workers that don't necessarily have Slack or email. How are those folks engaging?
See, that's the beauty of using text. In fact, many organizations, what we found is, a lot of their frontline staff and people, like we were working with a grocery store, and none of them even had corporate emails. Mm-hmm. Right? So they didn't have any effective way to really communicate with them well, other than, of course, their managers, individual managers, were sending texts and sending updates about here's your schedules and everything via text, because that's the only communication that worked. Mm-hmm. But the managers had it, but the corporate didn't have any way. So that's where, it's
genius. Really well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And again, whatever works best for each company is different. And of course, it's not a one size, everybody has to do this versus that. So it can be very flexible. But that is, I love the text because we get such a quick and easy response. And it's also just easy for your people.
One other question. I see that the beauty is being able to respond in a timely manner. But is someone waiting at the computer when a ping goes live? How long after the employee, respond with my sentiment and my feedback before someone responds back to me?
Well, so we have a guarantee within a couple hours that we'll have a response. So literally, definitely same day and less than that. And frankly, most of the time it is pretty almost immediate. That's our goal. That's our goal, is to try to communicate in the moment, because again, that's where we struggled with some organizations, where if they didn't have the resources and then you go respond to somebody on a text a week ago, well, that's a week ago. It's kind of the same thing with the survey, right? Well, yeah, a week ago on a text is kind of like 6 months ago on a survey. So, so one of the last things I wanted to show you here was just that there's a variety of all kinds of different reports and ways that we can look at this, everything from sentiment analysis to, a variety of ways. But what I love to look at is, okay, so, if you look at this company, well, I'll go back to the home screen here in a second and show you, frankly, how amazing they are. But not everything is perfect, right? not everything is perfect. And so they have some opportunities. And what this does is when I sort by impact, it sorts right to the top. Well, hey, here's what the data is telling you is most important. And here's areas or gaps that you have within the organization. And then you can see that as you continue to scroll down here. Here's your high impact, here's your medium impact. Well, what if I want to figure out, what has the most effect on the top line or the bottom line? Well, here are the metrics that are associated and correlated to those. And here's the metrics that are correlated to the bottom line and that type of thing. And, engagement or people or all of that. So it just helps you to understand again with that. But the other thing that we do is we have a team of strategic advisors that also guide you. We don't just hand this to you and say, hey, good luck, hope you figure it out. Is we have a team of strategic advisors that meets with you to then help you look at, hey, what are your organizational goals? What are you trying to accomplish? What's the data telling us? And then because of course, we can't work on everything all at the same time, but we're going to pick and identify which ones are the most important. And that's what our teams are designed to help you to do. Identify the key things and then be able to help guide you. So we have these strategic advisors that help you and assist you with that.
Nice.
But I was going to... Oh, sorry.
So, hey, before you jump ahead, Robert, I just want to do a time check here because I know that we've talked before and have gone on for hours longer than we should have. So, and even though the next speaker has woken up extra early to join us from Australia, I still don't want to, and it'll be hard for her to track her down. I don't want her to be upset. So, just I'm going to put this out to the folks that are attending. If you have any questions, please drop them in the chat and we can address those. And we will summarize, give you this report, give you not a report, but give you the recording or access to it, and ways to contact Robert. So we'll take care of that via email. But and so we should probably think about winding down.
Absolutely. Yeah. The last thing I wanted to share was, employee net promoter score is a very common term and a common statistic and way to measure engagement out there. And so for those of you that aren't familiar with it, employee net promoter score essentially asks a single question. And that question is really, would you recommend your friends and family to work at this specific company? And then what we do is we use the Likert scale on a scale of 1 to 5. So 5 are promoters, 4s are neutrals, and 1, 2s, and 3s are detractors. Well, if you look at this organization, this will tell you how amazing this is, because you can have a scale of a negative 100 if everybody was a detractor, or a positive 100 if everybody was a promoter, but you'll see that they're at an 88. Any company in the world would be salivating to have almost everybody giving you a 5, a couple people giving you a neutral, and not a single detractor within the organization. Awesome. That's the power. And again, these guys have been on the platform for about a year. They've seen major, major improvements. They went through COVID this last year and actually had to lay off people. And this is where they sit. Fantastic. This is phenomenal. And this is the power of the platform and data. So whatever the problems or the fires or the things that you're struggling with within your organization, I truly believe that the best way to solve and fix those is to understand them, because it will become clear and you will have clarity surrounding what to do once you understand why and the root cause of the problems you're having. And that's what this tool does. It gives you live, real-time, actionable insight surrounding your people.
And Robert, one last thing. I know that you've created a special offer for folks that attend the summit. Will you share that with folks?
Yeah. So what we would like to do is prove it to you. I don't need you to take my word on it. We can show it to you all day. But what we want to do is help you to get it involved in your organization. And so what we're willing to do is give you a 30-day trial or a 30-day complimentary version of the software, where normally, like if you went to our website, we give you a single campaign and just kind of a little test to try with the team. But as part of this, we're going to enable the entire platform. And we will give you data across the entire organization, whatever, and we'll work with you. We'll hold your hand through the process to identify the right metrics and what you're looking to know and understand. But if you're struggling with something in your organization and you need the insight to know what to do about it, that's where I can help you. And we're happy to give it to you free just to show you the power of the platform. Frankly, because we know that once you then show that to your executives and the people within the organization, and you now have the data, that this will guide and help you to succeed. And that's our whole purpose. Our stated purpose as a company is people. And that's what we're here to help and to create that human experience at work.
So everybody that's live online, I will do an introduction if you want to take Robert up on his offer, and everybody can wave and say goodbye, and I'm going to end the session.
Awesome.
Right? Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.
Have a great day, everyone.